Hi everyone, welcome to Swept Media at the convergence of AI and Web3. Today we're going to be talking about Saakuru Labs, the co-founder, Jack Vinijtrongjit. We talked about Saakuru and the Saakuru Agentic Framework that's coming up. Saakuru is an Oasis L2 that focuses on gaming. It's a gasless chain, which is really nice. It does use gas to execute transactions. I don't know if that's even possible not to have gas. But essentially the gas fees that would be spent are stored away by the protocol, and essentially every transaction is subsidized by that stash of gas that has been made by the protocol. It's supposed to entice developers to come and deploy their work there. Of course, it's most likely going to be games, and users to come play the games because they don't have to worry about how much gas is in their wallet when they want to go play a game. It's a hassle to have to do something like that, right? So Saakuru solves the gas problem with games. It makes games a lot easier to play. If the games are fun, which many of them on Saakuru are, then that makes it all the better. It's a much better gaming experience for people who are interested in something like that. But I talked with Jack about specifically his AI Agentic Framework, which just released either yesterday or today. He's been talking about it quite a bit. I don't yet have docs for it. We don't have any way to audit it, and I don't see it on the website. There's no interface for it. Let's take a look at this Saakuru website, and then we'll dive into the interview. Saakuru is making all these games. They're not making the games, but they're housing these games and other apps. Playground, Samurai Saga is really fun. I saw a tournament for this a couple months ago. I think that was at last year's Korea Blockchain Week, actually. World Challenge, Taffy. This is a DEX actually, so that's another app, not a game. What's another one? Empire of Sight. That's a really fun game. So is Crypto Run. Yeah, there's some good stuff on Saakuru. You should check it out. And of course, they have a token. The token performance is not good lately, to be perfectly frank. It's down to like 6 cents or 7 cents. You'd like to see it pump a little more, especially since they're going to start doing buybacks at some point. But yeah, the token is not the focus of this interview. It's about the AI stuff, so we'll dive into that now. The interview is published on the site. It's actually the first interview that we're doing at Swept, and later on in a couple days we'll have a podcast with Jack as well. So he'll be the first interview and the first podcast for Swept Media. Very exciting stuff. Always really happy to see a founder be as dedicated to us. We certainly are happy to have him, Jack, that is, come in and share any updates that he has about Saakuru Labs and their AI Agentic Framework. What we talked about, and I wasn't able to fit the whole interview into this write-up. That's typically what happens in media. You might see an interview write-up and, the 60 Minutes one with Kamala Harris kind of illustrates that. I don't fault CBS for having to make cuts, and I don't think anyone does, because you just can't fit everything that is talked about over the course of an hour. You can't go word by word. It doesn't work. It's not fun to read. You have to cut things up, or you have to pick and choose the topics that are covered more, because for one thing, it might be more relevant to the contemporary mind share, and it might be more interesting for people to read. Same thing here. I'll try to talk about some other stuff that we talked about outside of what was written up in this interview, but the main thing here is the Saakuru Agentic Framework. Again, just released. He makes a lot of bold claims about it, which I had a few questions about. I'm not sure if he adequately answered them, but it might have been just him trying to not show his hand too much, which is fair. The main thing is he says it's going to significantly streamline agent deployment on Web3 games to volumes topping thousands of agents per game, deployed in a matter of minutes. That is a very bold claim. I would love to see something like that happen. Saakuru's, I think their scalability is quite good. He's confident that Saakuru could handle that now if people were to do this, use his AI Agentic Framework to deploy thousands of agents in a few minutes into their games as an NPC. Saakuru could handle that load without showing signs of stress. That's pretty impressive. It's better than Solana. It's better than any other network I've seen in real terms, not in theoretical terms. Now, another thing we talked about, and I asked him, like, okay, so you're doing an agentic framework. Is this a pivot? He's not pivoting. This agentic framework is in part trying to go along and future-proof Saakuru by adding an AI aspect, and also to shoehorn more functionality into the games that are deployed. So the main use case that he gave me now for what this agentic framework could be best used is, let's say you're playing a big open world game. Let's say it's like another Elden Ring, and you have literally thousands of NPCs in that game. If you've never played it, that's another one. Your life will change after you play that game. But there's so many NPCs. It's a huge, huge game. Each of the NPCs, if it were on Saakuru and deployed using the Saakuru Agentic Framework, according to Jack, each of the NPCs would have a mind of its own, essentially. There would be memories of the way that you interacted with it. There would be an emotional response given to those interactions, which would have a tremendous outcome on the circumstances of the game, your game. And with Elden Ring, you can play the game again and again and again as the same character, more leveled up. And there are some aspects that are carried over from each completion if you use the same character. I imagine that using AI agents in the games would add even further complexity to something like that. So that's the main use case that he gave for me and what I could suss out from him. And it is meant to address this problem. He says, the Saakuru AI Agentic Framework doesn't create a new problem. It creates a new solution for the same problem, including accessing the full functionality of a system. As it relates to gaming, I want to do something that I was told was impossible. And yeah, this seems impossible. It seems like, how do you have an emotional response, an agent with emotional responses, memories of the ways that you've interacted with it, that affect the way that it interacts with you at later times in a game, and can affect the outcome of the game as a whole? And not just by a rules-based system, not categorically, but in a free-form way, in a more realistic way. There are times where you play these games and you're about to get into the uncanny valley of, wow, this is a lot of fun. I could see myself being in this world. And then something totally unreal and inhuman happens, and it kind of pulls you out of the experience a little bit. Granted, you always know that you're playing a game in front of a screen. But the idea there being like there's something that's totally unreal, and it pulls you out of the experience. With an AI agent acting as an NPC, it can hopefully keep you engaged in the game without leaving that kind of borderline of the uncanny valley of the realism of the game. Another issue that he talked about was AI Swarm, and AI Swarm refers to the exponential growth of network capability between agents working in a single system. So you have 100 agents deployed across the system. They're all learning from different, maybe from the same large unstructured data, but they may be structuring the data in their own way. And that's their particular function in the system. Then the swarm happens when AI number one or agent number one learns from agent number two, and agent number two learns from what agent number three has done, and so on and so forth until it all becomes clumped together, and it's a swarm of a system. He said, what if you have an RPG game with 10,000 agents that have all interactions with each other? Our framework is trying to solve efficient deployment of thousands of agents at a time for games inclusive of multiple languages. That's another thing we talked about. I brought up the issue in Saakuru, which is a game from Software. You're essentially a samurai who gets his arm cut off, and you got to go around and seek vengeance and find the guy who did it. But essentially, the game makers from Software basically insist that you keep the audio dialogue in Japanese. And if you want to experience or understand what the dialogue is, if you don't speak Japanese, use captions. because there are nuances in the Japanese language that just don't translate right. So if you play it in Japanese, you get those facial expressions and you get the intonation of Japanese, so it conveys the right way of saying what it is the dialogue is supposed to say. But you can get a reasonable translation in the captions. So it doesn't take away from the realism, from the analog of the dialogue, while still allowing audiences and players from around the world to understand what's going on. And I'm sitting there going, okay, I respect that they have respect for their language, for the Japanese language and their culture. They have every right to do something like that. And honestly, if I were to make a game like that, I might insist on something like that too. But why can't I just listen to it in English and have it make the same sense? Like, why can't it be a perfect translation? Well, part of it is there's a lot of work that goes into those translations. Localizing a game takes hundreds and hundreds of hours in and of itself, aside from the other developmental parts of the game. Localizing it is a huge undertaking. So that's one part. Another part is there's a huge gulf between the nuances of English and the nuances of Japanese, that is, like in the intonation of the way they say things, in the idioms that they use. So much so that for many phrases and ways of speaking in Japanese, there's no reasonable translation for that. There's no way for it to make perfect sense in English. So many times if you watch a Japanese movie or something like that, consume some kind of Japanese content, if you're listening to it in English, watching it in English, just know that you're getting, in some cases, just a snippet of the meaning that is actually loaded in those Japanese words. So that's a difficult obstacle to overcome. With an AI agent, you may be able to do that, because the AI agent may have the emotional capacity to understand how to convey the right emotions mixed with the right words so that they make sense in any language. It's a tremendous feat if he can do it. He says he can do it with this other AI agent as part of the agentic framework called Dr. Cope. He says it's going to be, or is currently being trained in human psychology to give its memories emotional feedback. And this is an issue of data. Like, there's 2.5 petabytes of data in your brain. Is every single game going to need that much space? Like, there was no good answer for that, because there's a ton of data that needs to be cached and readily available in real time. Both the stuff that you have to start the game with, and then as you play the game, more and more data is collected from these agents on how you behave with them. Nobody has that much data in their game station. Nobody does, with obviously a few exceptions. Maybe Elon Musk does or something. But it's not a realistic thing to ask for. Maybe cloud data can solve that, but then the spend of Saakuru to make that happen for every player would be astronomical in that as well. So, I mean, it's something that needs to be figured out. I don't have the solution. Maybe he has one and he was keeping it closer to his chest. That's fair enough. Maybe we'll get an answer to that later on. So then he talked about how he's not really happy with how Virtuals and Eliza OS are serving the market. He thinks that Saakuru Agentic Framework can do better for a number of reasons. One of them being Saakuru Agentic Framework is no code. You don't have to know how to code in order to use it. It's, for me, that's great. I don't know how to code. So if I could use a chatbot and type in a prompt that has been engineered properly to produce 1,000 agents to do the things that I need them to do, and it just does it in a matter of minutes and the deployments are done, that's a huge step up. We take a lot of effort out of this, and it makes the world a better place, it makes games better, it makes crypto better, it makes blockchain better, it makes AI much more powerful. Now, can Saakuru do this? These are lofty goals. Anything is possible. I think that's the main message I'm trying to convey in this interview. Even small things that seem impossible shouldn't seem impossible. One of the themes of this channel is things that you think are impossible now in terms of AI are not going to seem impossible in a year. I don't know how it's going to happen. I don't know when. But I think that what he's aiming at is doable, in the sense that anything is doable in AI right now. There's no ceiling yet. So stay tuned. I'm sure there'll be many more updates from Jack. He's been a great contributor so far in this early stage of Swept, to make it grow. And then we'll be able to get down to the bottom of everything that Saakuru is doing and benefiting for the AI world. So until then, thanks a lot. Stay tuned. We'll talk to you next time.